Class, Sasanian Persia is going to last from about 224 to 651 of the Common Era. And they rule a large amount of territories on the Iranian plateau and the Mesopotamia to the east of Justinian's empire based in Constantinople. And showing its universal aspirations, its ruler was known as the King of Iran and on Iran, which means King of Kings of Iranian and non-Iranian lands. Its capital was between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers that we've talked about, near current-day Baghdad. And there, the monumental Great Arch of King Caruso, it's going to symbolize the king's power, the main rival to Justinian. And he sought to establish himself as the ideal monarch in the East, as Justin had done in the West. And he had a highly effective military machine and that showed the strength of its armed cavalry. And around 540, even sacked the Rome's province of Antioch, and he demonstrated that his empire was a formidable challenge to the Rome's continued expansion eastward. Now, in a major war between Persia and Rome, the Persian forces went to conquer Egypt and Syria and even advanced to the capital of Constantinople before being rebuffed. In this expansionism, the Sasanians benefited from a population that shared a dominant language, Syriac, and a broader cultural traits. However, I want to point out that it was a cultural crossroads. International relations and stability benefited from Sasanian toleration of Christianity and Judaism, even though, remember, the major religion in Persia is going to be Zoroastrianism. Christians are going to use this time to expand their faith, and even Judaism is going to expand. Unfortunately, the constant battles with Rome is going to exhaust both empires to the point of weakening them for invasion later from the Arabic Islamic dynasties to come. Now, though it existed for centuries, I want to go back to the Silk Road for a minute. We've talked about it before, but the Silk Road in these years is really going to be a conduit for the spread of universalizing faiths of Buddhism, Christianity, and the Vedic religions like Hinduism across Afro-Eurasia. And in this context, Central Asia, with its various oasis cities, is going to become a crucial hub for cross-cultural contact. And in this space, nomadic rulers control some of the key cities along the Silk Road. Class, the Sogdians. They were lords supreme and ruled as intermediaries in the oasis cities on the Silk Roads connecting the extreme Afro-Eurasia landmass. They practiced a fusion of Zoroastrianism and Hindu beliefs, and they spoke the lingua franca of these trade routes. Now, in addition to acting as cultural intermediaries, they used camels to traffic commodities, and their great wealth is visible in the excavated mansions and palaces that they constructed in these oasis cities where everybody stopped. The Chinese said of the Sogdians, they had honey on their tongues and gum on their fingers. Also, they said the Sogdians would haggle over a fraction of a cent. I love these guys. Now, the Silk Roads also facilitated the spread of Buddhism, which emerged when Buddhist monks from the south of Hindu Kush Mountains into the Central Asia and then toward China. Large statues of Buddhist monks are going to mark this route, including two enormous ones. And you can see the picture of what it looked like here. Sadly, the Taliban in 2001 destroyed some of these large Buddha statues. Interestingly, after their destruction, caves were uncovered, revealing never-before-seen wall paintings. And here's some more of the destruction by the Taliban in 2001 in the area. Here's some more of the Buddhist statues along the way. Now, in contrast to trade routes like the Silk Road, along which ideas are going to spread in Afro-Eurasia, In sub-Saharan Africa and in Mesoamerica, it was really much more challenging for people and goods and ideas and practices to spread. We're going to see that time and time again over large territories. Is there trade? Yes, there's trade, but it is not widespread and it doesn't have the development that we see the Silk Road have. Consequently, these universalizing faiths do not appear in sub-Saharan Africa or in Mesoamerica. Now, the Bantu-speaking people of sub-Saharan Africa class are going to shift from hunting and gathering and fishing to a settled agricultural society after they became the most expansionistic of African peoples. They're going to spread with great speed out from West Africa in two large waves across the Congo forest toward East Africa, and a second wave is going to go southward toward the Kalahari Desert. Now, over time, they'll absorb the population they encounter that inhabited these lands. And this is possible because they were highly effective in adapting their agricultural skills to different regions. And they, survived on things like the cultivation of the banana plant. That became very important to their agricultural. And this, as they migrated across these large distances, they're going to settle in very different ecological zones. And this is going to make centralization of one political entity or the extension of a cohesive social and cultural system unlikely. However, in the eastern Bantu regions around these greater lakes that they have there, centralized polities did emerge in that particular region. They're going to be ruled by some kings who claim a divine right to power, and they're going to become wealthy over time. And again, that's going to happen in some areas. But in the western Bantu-speaking communities in the rainforest of the sub-Saharan Africa, you're going to see small-scale societies based on kinship and clans were the norm. That's the majority that will become in social life in Africa. And they're going to be organized into these age groups, and which designated responsibilities and identities within the societies. And as these communities did not have a king rule, they were instead ruled by exceptional elders or individuals who used their own talents for acquiring power, and they often referred to themselves as big men. Now, they established some power through some military accomplishments, but never to the extent of Eurasia. Bantus perceived a natural world animated by spirits, good and bad, that diviners and charmers could influence these spirits to protect themselves and hurt others. So in summary, the Bantu migrations had a tremendous impact in Africa, gradually spreading over more than half of its landmass. And they extended a political and social order, again, based on family and clans. But it did allow for some, significant space for individual achievement, like through the big men. And it was based on a close dynamic with the natural world that seemed to imbue both good and bad supernatural forces, which they're going to try to control. Now, these general patterns are going to persist for nearly a millennium and a half prior to the arrival of European colonialism. So let's talk a little bit about Mesoamerica. As in sub-Saharan Africa and Mesoamerica, there's not this major territorial empires on the scale of Afro-Eurasian empires. However, there are some that do develop much more rapidly. The Teotihuacan and the Mayan settlements are going to make significant developments during these centuries. Teotihuacan peoples are going to emerge in the valley of central Mexico in the 1st century of the Common Era as sort of a city-state type region. And it's going to prove to be the largest settlement in the region until the Aztecs a half a millennium later. And they're going to use this fertile land to enhance agricultural productivity that could sustain a larger population. Now, the spiritual life of this population was centered in large pyramids devoted to the sun and the moon. And at the city center, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, a stepped stone pyramid distinguishing the city in Mesoamerica and was crucial to their spiritual life and their understanding of their existence. It was also the site of human sacrifice rites, essential for their religious practices. In order to appease their gods, they needed rain and they needed their crops to grow, so bloodletting proved to be necessary for the gods. From this base, it's going to expand control of the valley through warfare, things like annexation, and the creation of tributary relations with its conquered peoples. Now, although its direct political influence didn't reach much beyond the Valley of Mexico, its cultural and economic influence is going to resonate a little bit further. Its trade goods, commodities, and manufactured products, they were well known for their obsidian tools. They'll be trafficked in and out by porters throughout Mesoamerica, but not widespread. However, in the 5th century, it appears, according to scholars, that invaders attacked Teotihuacan and diminished its power. Sadly, class, all of their books and writings have perished. And here's a map with, you can see Teotihuacan, and then you can also see the Mayan over there, think Cancun. And this is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, or the plumed serpent. And it's a name for the feathered serpent deity of ancient Mesoamerican culture. In Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl is also a mythical culture hero from whom almost all Mesoamerican peoples claim descent. Class, to the east, on the Yucatan Peninsula, the Mayans emerged around 250 of the Common Era until the 8th century. Now, in contrast to Teotihuacan, they have thousands of agrarian villages, and this large population, perhaps 10 million at its peak, shared a Mayan language and was interconnected by tributary payments and trade. Now, in this context, there's various kingdoms that functioned as ritual centers for the large hinterlands. And though they were politically independent and competed with each other, they were interconnected through commerce as well. So, for example, places like Tikal becomes especially large, important centers with their own realms of influence. Now, within these kingdoms, an elaborate class structure existed to stratify society. The preeminent position was a shamanistic king who claimed a privileged descent and connection with the gods. And this is reflected in the importance of a complex system of gods. Each sub-region had its own special patron deity. But across regions, there was a shared creator god like Quetzalcoatl, with specific deities for the crucial phenomena of rain and maize and war and the sun. And alongside this pantheon of gods, kings were responsible for making sure that they were adequately worshipped. And in part, to emphasize their own connection with the gods, kings organized elaborate public rituals to the deities. In Mayan society, the most important roles were held by the priestly elite involved in this worship, people like scribes and military advisors, and then a little bit further down, skilled artisans. To sustain a large population in this challenging ecological context, Mayans depended largely on subsistence agriculture that cultivated a diverse combination of crops: maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters, as well as root crops, and cotton, a form of cotton. In addition to commercial ties, Mayan villages were interconnected by a common belief, code, and value system. And a similar language with a common script is going to facilitate this exchange. Scribes were central to this, and again, like I said, held important social positions. As in other civilizations, this written language just could serve to justify or enhance political power. One example is the Popol Vuh, or a book of community, which recounts the history of one kingdom from creation to present. Now, their written skills also extended to mathematics and the use of zero. Their skills are also seen in the use of a calendar, which reflected sophisticated understanding of astronomy that they had developed. They had precise predictions of lunar and solar cycles. And as writing helped to place communities within a larger understanding of their universe, they had large-scale building of pyramids and temples to serve as well, emphasizing a public view of the community's relationship with the supernatural world. Now, Mayan kingdoms committed a lot of energy to bloodletting, class. Ritualized bloodletting served to honor rulers and ancestors and to legitimize rulers' own lineage. In addition to shedding their own blood, they required acquisition of people to sacrifice, which led to frequent warfare with other kingdoms. Ball games were played too, often to the death. This is going to lead to sort of an unsustainable cycle of violence, which ultimately undermines the stability of rule and leads to the decline of Mayan communities. Do Mayans still exist? Yes, class. And I've pulled in a couple of short videos for you in Canvas for you to learn more about the Mayans then and today. This is their script on a wooden tablet and the pictograms that they've interpreted. And finally, class, let's talk a little bit about East Asia and what's happening in China. Now, remember, the fall of the Han Dynasty creates disunity and disorder, but it also opens the way for a surge of new influences from the Silk Roads, including Buddhism from South Asia and new forms of Taoism. And we talked a little bit about this last time. So for 3 centuries, known as the Six Dynasties period, several small kingdoms are going to fight over the territory once ruled by the great and powerful Han. The Wei Dynasty in northern China emerges as the strongest, and they were founded by the Tuoba people in 386 of the Common Era. They had lived within the Han system, and as rulers, they administered part of the Han territory and maintained much of the same type of statecraft, court life, and other practices that the Han employed. To strengthen their hold on cities, they adapted their armies to urban-based military technology. Now, the Tuoba families who ruled the dynasty really struggled to consolidate, all of the dynasties and the people that they ruled over. So to do so, they attempted to make their government more Chinese. That is, adopting the family name Yuan and insisting on the use of Chinese language and culture, and offered some power to the Han Chinese families that remained. A major figure in attempting to manage the Wei dynasty is going to be Dowager Empress Fang, who was regent from 476 to 490 of the Common Era. And she tried to implement some land reforms, but really failed to bridge, the divides felt in China. So Buddhism is growing, and we talked about that, and it's, again, offering an appealing, universalizing message. Now, there was an intermediary for the spread of the faith, Kumarajiva. He was a missionary, and he skillfully translated Buddhist texts from Sanskrit into Chinese and kind of clarified the meanings of Buddhist terms and philosophy. And it even led to another offshoot of Mahayana Buddhism that we've talked about. So we've got another development in Buddhism called the Middle Way. Now, pagodas, or houses of worship, are going to spread through Asia during this time. Just like all the churches and basilicas built, we're going to see the same thing happen in Asia. And this is an example of one of those. The giant wild goose pagoda built around 600 of the Common Era is a rammed earth example of a pagoda. So class, what we've seen is that in contrast to earlier periods, following the decline of the Roman Empire, remember, it doesn't fall, it just goes into decline in the Mediterranean area and the Han Chinese in China, religion and shared culture are becoming more important for unifying large territories during this time than military conquest and political centralization. So as the former Roman Empire was divided in the Mediterranean, the Catholic Church emerges, and the Christianity is really going to fuse with political power. And in China, the fragmentation of the Han power is going to, and the fall of its Confucian officials is going to allow Buddhism to become very important and spread. And in South Asia, again, Hinduism is spreading, and it appeals to a broader population. So coming up in our next lectures, we're going to find the unifying religion of Islam is going to take military conquests for power and control more so. Instead of taking a legitimate empire, they're going to create their own militaristic empires. So we'll talk about that more in the future. As usual, class, keep in touch.